Please rise and salute the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Price, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Carol Bites, present. Mr. Kurtz.
Here.
Mr. Martino. Mr. Okus O'Neill.
Here.
Mr. Potts.
Here.
Mr. Rathke.
Here.
Mr. Scott.
Here.
Ms. Twardowski. Here. Mr. Wolf.
Here. Okay, under announcements, we have, first of all, we had an executive session before this meeting. We're going to have to discuss negotiations. We're going to have another executive session following this meeting to discuss personnel. We do have some agenda edits. The first edit is item A. This is revised. We're revising the amount from $11,825 to $11,233.75. So that again is 8H. The second edit is letter O. We're pulling that from the agenda. Under 11A1B, please add personnel, under personnel approvals, 11A, just 1A, or we're adding just B? Just B? We're adding B for the long-term substitute for third grade. And under 11B1A, add to, for the following leaves, Michelle Green, should say, Micheline Green?
Michelle. She goes by Mickey.
There are no more other agendas.
So I actually asked that item, the revised item 8H, be pulled from the consent agenda and the actually voted on individual.
For 8H, the one we just,
Yeah.
okay.
You're just going to pull it out of the consent?
We're
Well,
gonna,
not the consent, yes.
Thank you.
And Mr. Wolf, can I ask that you approve item 8E from the consent?
8E, motion to approve the minutes from February 22nd.
Specifically, I'm inclined to want to change the motion to be February and March for a February voting minutes, but the March 14 committee of the whole and special voting meeting, I'd rather not vote on those tonight. At the very least, I'd like to remove the consent agenda. So I can make a motion to
So
table.
just the March 14th special voting meeting minutes, you would like to have stricken from that motion?
March 14 committee of the whole and March 14 special voting.
Okay.
So I guess we'll leave item E then as approved the minutes of February 22nd.
He's making a motion to change it to the second.
Right, this is just to allow. Somebody else on?
Or we could just strike the thing, and we could
Yeah,
talk about it.
my understanding is the practice was to allow amendments, to propose amendments to the agenda, and then the revised agenda would need to be approved by the board.
If,
Okay, so we're going to strike March 14th.
I'll just
Committee of the whole
update it.
and special voting meeting.
What are we doing?
We're striking from 8E, the motion will now read, motion to approve the minutes of the February 22nd voting meeting.
That's it?
Period.
Okay.
Is there any other agenda edits? Okay. Procedures for public participation are printed in the inside of the blue cover of the agenda. If you haven't done so, please take a minute to sign in the back of the room. If you'd like to address the board, when you approach the podium, please sign in there also. State your name and your address for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. Also, we have handouts, I shouldn't say handouts, these are items that are attachments for us. If you'd like to see them, they're printed on our website, and a hard copy is also available on the back table for you to look at as well. Okay. Number 6, presentations. Does anyone have public comment on any of the agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move to 7, recognitions for March.
Can you call Megan Waterman, please? She's going to read the stuff.
Megan Weber, please come forward.
And if you guys just go up there, you'll hand the certificates out in the mic. Remember, group shot at each group.
Good evening, everyone. I have the distinct honor of helping to recognize a whole slew of students tonight for a variety of reasons. Thankfully and wonderfully tonight, they're all from the high school. So thank you for everyone for coming out. Our first award goes to the Girl Scouts, or is the Girl Scout Gold Award. This recognition is for two of our Girl Scouts. This is the Girl Scout Gold Award, which is the highest award in Girl Scouting. This was based on our commitment and willingness to strive for excellence. Our first award is Caitlin Shellhammer. And our second is Grace Cody.
That would be a good idea.
It would be better.
Okay.
Our next group are VCTC East students of the quarter, or students of the first quarter, excuse me. Our first is Jonathan Moreno for Auto Collision Repair Technology. Our second is Robert Shaner in Carpentry. Rebecca Herforth for Cosmetology. Marissa Burton, also in Cosmetology.
Rebecca, we're going to take one group
Nick
shot.
Nairn, Culinary Arts. Kate Geist for Health-Related Technology. Julian Perez Marine in IT Networking. Good job. We then have our VCTC East students of the second quarter. Matthew Hennessy, Auto Collision Repair Technology. Michael Frank in culinary arts. Renee Allweiser, dental occupations. Zachary Schnabel, drafting and design technology. Carl Levingood, electrical occupations. Emily Combs Bradbury, health occupation. Emily Dara, horticulture. And Morgan Shirk, service occupations. The next honorees are from the 2016 BCIU Art Show. For Keller Drawing, we have in third place Mickey Flanagan. In the black and white drawing, third place Lily Kurtz. And an honorable mention, Maddie Bruns. Printmaking honorable mention, Morgan McDonald. Black and white photography, first place, Maddie Loomis. Keller photography, second place, Marissa Gass. Honorable mention, Maddie Loomis. Then we have jewelry, which I feel like we had a full suite, so let me go through them all because it's impressive. First place, Mackenzie Witzel. Second place, Elena Reisner. Third place, Kim Nelligan. Honorable mentions for Jesse Enck, Maddie Stofflet, Ellen Pussy, and Kim Nelligan.
Kim Nelligan.
Then in textiles, we have second place, Amanda Hatfield, an honorable mention for Mackenzie Witzel. In hand-built pottery, we have first place, Mickey Flanagan, and honorable mention to Sammy Eckert. In wheel-thrown pottery, we had an honorable mention for Julia Cinquanto. And then, And then finally, the Ruth Ann Hartung 2D Award was awarded to Nikki Flanagan for her black and white drawing, and she was also the recipient of $100. Thank you, and that we had the most in the county of any school district. Great job, everyone.
Megan.
This is Weber.
One-on-one photo.
It is.
I wanted to add that I had the privilege to go and see the BCIU art show, and I overheard at least one patron, one visitor say that they thought Denver had the best art on exhibit. So it was truly exceptional.
Our next honorees are our back-to-back EPSHL Royals Cup champions, our Daniel Boone Blazer hockey team. We have Jamison Burns, Dylan Sachs, Cole Becker, Buddy Alvaro, Colin Gavitt, Jack Orendorf, Trevor Sakala, Nathaniel Leon Guerrero, Connor Cleaver, Taylor Landis, Ryan Duffy, Wyatt Leger. Lindsay McGregor. Riley Mushik. David Heasley. John Peterson. And Anthony Zavala. Thank you.
Picture. I'm sorry? They won the actual whole thing. The whole thing? Second time around. Thanks for that. You're welcome.
Hey.
If anybody who is recognized would like to leave, so you can do something else with your night, you won't hurt her feelings, it's okay.
Don't hurt yourself.
Running out. Really should stay, especially the hockey game.
Okay. We'll move to the consent agenda as modified.
I'll make motion
Consent agenda.
approve the consent agenda with the modifications that were listed earlier. You want me to go over them?
The agenda edits and Mr. Kurtz's motion to remove part of item E and pull from the agenda G, I'm sorry,
H.
H.
Yes.
Multiple, okay.
Second.
First by Ms. Twardowski, second by Mr. Kurtz.
After joint discussion.
Any discussion?
Can you do a roll call first?
We'll do the consent agenda, please.
We can do it, just go.
A voice vote.
Voice voters. Do I?
hear any vote? Okay, so this will be a voice vote.
All in favor, say aye.
All in favor, this will be a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Anybody opposed?
Motion passes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, now if we want to go back to G, to H. Hold that one individual. So a motion for H.
I'll make a motion for H.
Second.
First by Ms. Twardowski, second by Mr. Scott.
And we're going to do a roll call.
When you're ready, a roll. Is there any discussion?
We're all, was it satisfactory to the solicitor?
With respect to the issues that were raised, the main issue raised was the automatic increases during the term of the contract and actually the term in relation to the district's ability to terminate the union early. In my negotiations with the provider, they reduced the annual increase on a 60-month term. Actually, it's been increased to a 63-month term as written, pursuant to the revised order, which the actual 3 months is the current school year. and they reduced their fee from, their annual fee increase from 5% to 4.5%. The other option was to go with a 12-month term, in which case they, in actuality, the new negotiation every year, but they said that their practice was to increase the annual increases for yearly contracts was 7.5%. They were willing to reduce that to 6.5%. So Mr. Max had recommended going with the 60-month or 5-year term, 63-month term with the 4.5 increase. That is the way the agreement is being presented. There's the change in the amount is a 5% additional discount on the first annual subscription that town had offered during the negotiation. The issue regarding termination, as it's written, the original 90-day termination provision only applies at the end of that 5-year term. However, they added a term whereby if the district decided not to fund this type of service, so it's not just this contract, but this type of service, that we could give them 45 days notice prior to the end of any then current fiscal year, in which case the contract would end at the end of that fiscal year. So if we decided that next year we wanted to terminate this, we'd give them 45 days prior to June 30, we'd be able to terminate the agreement. But the condition is because that's based on your decision not to fund this type of service, we would not be able to obtain the same or a similar service from another vendor for a period of 12 months. And that was the best that they were willing to do on those terms, and that's how it's being presented this evening.
I have a question for Mr. Harris regarding this. I mean, 5 years is a pretty long time period. If we were to change staffing at the higher level, and if we were to have an HR person at some point in the next 5 years, would they continue with this program suited to the change? Or do we have a different
Strategy.
different program using different strategy? Because I know we're kind of without an HR person, it's tough sometimes.
I could just add that pursuant to the terms, if you were to bring the work that would be done by these modules, the appointment application process and the record keeping process in-house, that's allowable. You could terminate at the end of any year with the 45 days notice if you were bringing it back in-house through the additional staff.
So would we have to build the software ourselves, or could we bring in a third party? Like, I'm wondering what that in-house means.
The one thing you couldn't do is bring in another software provider who would provide you the same or similar product.
And that's for 5 years, even if we terminate after 1 year?
No, for 12 months.
Oh, okay.
1 year following the termination, so you terminate, and you have to wait 12 months before you can reinstitute. You wouldn't have to wait 5 years, just 12 months.
I know, and I apologize, because I was absent last month and I didn't come. Do we have something that does this now? No. So we're not replacing anything but somebody's manual record keeping?
We do personnel, we currently do HR personnel functions here, but they're not connected. It's very on paper. This helps us organize, and even if we were to bring in an HR director, this is a tool that they would need.
Is there a rationale for the automatic increase annually?
Their only justification is that this is the way they do business, that is a standard term. And again, they reduced it. They said that was their bottom line. Their reduction was their bottom line reduction. But it's their business term. It's a business term. So beyond that, other than this is a standard business term in their business arrangements, there's no further
there additional maintenance or that they have to do other than outside of just changing the entry points of, the folks who are in the system?
So once it's set up, it's basically maintained by our district staff, we really don't have anything. And also to just address the annual increase, that is something we see commonly. It's something that the district is not hosting in-house because we're relying on their servers, their software developers. So that is not unusual for some of these software as a service type packages. But no, once it's set up, they will go through implementation with us, and at that point, it's our data, we maintain everything going forward, other than the normal software updates, that sort of thing.
And does that cost include, the annual upgrade to the software that they'll have?
Yeah, it's annual upgrade, it's training, it's support, it's all part of it.
So if a new version comes out 2 years from now, it's included in the price we get?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
No upcharges for that?
Correct.
So, sorry, Scott, so basically, instead of buying it and paying a maintenance and support like yearly fee, we're kind of leasing it for 5 years?
Yeah, essentially. They don't offer an in-house version, they host it on their system, so redundancy, backup, that's all done on their end.
Okay.
Now, Scott, one final question. If we were to terminate the agreement with them, all the data that has been input into their system, do we get a record of that, or it's basically lost and we have to start over with someone else?
No, we own the data, it's our data, and they have export functionality, so no, we would not lose.
So you would have the electronic version of all the data would be in state electronic?
Yep, that.
And that would be something if we went to another vendor that it's importable into their system and you could start?
Yeah, you probably have to get it into a format, but you can export it as standard, CSVs, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Tom.
I have a quick question. Is it American support, tech support, and is it included in the contract? Or is there charge for tech support?
The support is included in the contract. I know they're based out of Kansas City. I honestly don't know where their support center is, but I believe the mothership also is in Texas, so I believe we're one of the, a totally American company.
Thank you.
Is there any other board discussion? Mrs. Bites, when you're ready, call the roll, please.
Okay. Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Martino? You don't have to say Mr. Ocas O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Potts?
Yes.
Mr. Rathgeb?
No.
Mr. Scott?
No.
Mr. Dowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Bites? Yes. Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-2.
Okay, before we get off the consent agenda, I did want to thank the two anonymous donors that one case donated $1,000, another $300 donation, and another for $393. Very generous. I know these people, two of them anyway, want to be anonymous, but we do want to thank them. Okay, moving to K, motion to approve the following leaves as, do I have any motions for these?
Actually, can I make a motion for K and L, or do I need to take them separate?
Yeah, A through P was done.
Oh, wait,
We already did A.
The consent's done.
sorry.
All right, my mistake.
A to P and we did 8H. We should be on
Buildings and grounds.
buildings and grounds at this time.
All right.
The facilities committee did meet earlier this evening. We were given a lengthy list by Casey to start going over of the upcoming needs for the year and work that he'd like to be doing over the summer. He's putting together a spreadsheet for priorities and costs, and I'm most likely at the April meeting, we'll be looking to make at least a couple recommendations for things that need to be done prior to the school being out. Just a couple things that will be taking place that they are already doing what we had talked about before is lacrosse line installation on the artificial turf. Currently, the grounds crew paints those lines with chalk paint weekly, a couple times a week, and it's costly in both paint and also time. So Turf Track and Cord LLC is actually going to paint the lines with a paint that will last at least a year, hopefully, and that costs us $1,870, which is actually saving us money on cost and time. So that will be taking place hopefully as soon as the lacrosse is about to start. The next meeting would be prior to the next voting meeting, the 25th, April 25th. And we also have received a report from Mr. Miller, or an update on the garden and the nature area at Amity, and I think he's on later for this evening's agenda, so I'll leave that update to him. Thank you.
I have a quick question about the keys. This last week, I went up to the high school with Mrs. Buddy, took a look down in the storage unit in the basement just to see the excess supplies that we hear a lot about. And there were piles and piles of this lime marker. There was a lot of paint, years worth of this paint. And I was just curious if this came up or if we had any idea what we do with these excess supplies. Almost, I don't say, maybe like half a pallet worth of this lime marker.
Well, I'll have to let Casey address that specifically, but he did say that for the cross paint, they only had about enough to do one or two more.
So it's different.
So it may be a different paint.
The line marking paint, if you saw it, was 5-gallon pails. It's probably about a half a skid in the basement. That is used for all of the foul lines, all the football fields, field hockey fields, any practice areas we paint for the athletic staff throughout the whole year. We go through approximately about 2.5 skids per year.
Wow.
So we buy it by the skid. Paint doesn't go bad as long as we keep it sealed and we keep it in a conditioned environment. And we'll be purchasing probably another skid here, probably the end of baseball season, if not before. We get quite a price discount on it. Save about 25% if we buy it by the skid.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Twardowski? Thank you. Number 10, financial approvals. Do I have a motion for any of these items?
Mr. Wolf, can we take 10A alone, please, due to
10.
an individual vote?
We have to do one vote, and this is like the BCIU where it's two.
No, one vote,
Just
but
one?
it has
Yeah,
to be
all right.
individual.
So then I'm looking for a motion for 10A only.
Motion for 10A.
Second.
First by Mr. Kurtz, second by Mr. Potts.
After discussion.
Any board discussion?
Just wanted to add Ms. Twardowski at the next meeting, if you could pass on my comments from last.
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
No worries.
Which, just to refresh everybody's memory, was my comment about them not using the reserve money they set aside for feasors. They only use a very small portion of that for the feasors they produce.
A roll call vote, please.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote for motion 10A. Mr. Ocas O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Potts,
Yes.
Mr. Rathgeb,
Now,
Mr. Scott,
yes.
Ms. Twardowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Bites, yes. Mrs. Kurtz, Mr. Kurtz,
No, I mean, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Mr. Kurtz, yes, and Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1.
Mrs. Kurtz said no.
Chris is always saying no.
Listen, you got this done.
Continuing on with 10, do I have a motion for any other items?
I move 10B through E.
D, you said? D.
Oh, what's
Well, E will be a presentation.
10B through E.
Second.
Can I just,
Mr. Ochocinco, did you second it?
can I just add that items 10C and D would be contingent upon approval by the Dayton Board Education Association.
Is that friendly? Yeah. I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Kurtz, second by Mr. Rapkin.
It's actually second by Mr. Ochocinco. He had it first.
I didn't hear a second, so it's,
Oh,
gotta
yeah.
speak louder.
Yeah, speak up.
Any more discussion?
Sorry. All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none.
This will be a roll call vote for motion 10B through D. Mr. Opus O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Potts?
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Rathko?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Twardowski?
Yes.
Ms. Bites, yes. Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, moving to item 10E. It's a presentation by Ms. Sandra Kurtz-Baxter. Just tap the gray button on the bottom.
Good evening. I'm Sandy Kurtz-Baxter with Fairmount Capital. We are financial advisors for the borrowers that issue debt. In terms of further transactions, we have the swap advisors. And we've been talking with Warren about the potential swap consideration for the solicitors of loans. And he asked me to come in just to present at Fairmount Capital, who we are familiar with. A little bit about the role of the swap advisor, which is what we would be really serving as to you folks for this transaction. And a little bit about the actual 07 for funding you're considering and the swap that you're looking to enter into in advance of that the funding to lock in your current rate savings. So with that, I believe Lauren passed around a brief slide deck that I'll go through. And feel free to interject with questions or comments as I go through it. The introductory part is about us. I'll talk about the role, and then we'll get into your situation. So just turning to page 1, a little bit about Fairmount. We serve borrowers just like yourselves that borrow on a tax-exempt basis. And we serve them both in an advisory capacity, helping for their planning payments, and also on a swap advisory basis, or derivative considerations on the top of that. We're located in Philly. We're in one office. We're a fairly small group, but we've been doing this for over 25 years. So this is something we've got a lot of experience in, and we're doing it for some time. Just flipping to page 2, a little bit about the folks back at the office. I co-lead the firm. I'm the firm's managing partner from an office perspective. I also lead the firm's education practice. Most of our work is in the Mid-Atlantic area, specifically in the Philly region. But again, I've been doing this for over 15 years now, both on the advisory for financial, for debt planning, and also for derivatives. And then again, folks back at the office who also specialize in the same area. Flipping to page 4, a little bit about the swap practice of the firm. Again, we've been doing swap work for a long time, given that they probably gained in popularity in the mid-2000s. Our firm actually started doing it back in the early 90s, really in their infancy. Since 1999, we've done a fair number of trades, both entering into trades, terminating trades, different types of swaps. And as you can see on the left side of the page, I reference the various transactions that we've done with borrowers. Specifically, you guys are looking at a swap settle rate off, which we'll get into with respect to survey bonds, but just to give you a sense of our practice. Page 5, a little bit about the role that we play as swap advisor. Really, our job is to educate the the decision makers on what this is, the risks, the benefits, answer questions, make sure that folks understand what you're getting into, what could happen, both on the positive and negative side, as well as understand your goals and your risk tolerance and helping you determine and hone in on what makes the most sense here. We also take the lead on negotiating the correct credit considerations for these types of deals, kind of credit scores behind this stuff, trade specifics, anything by way of days and making sure the pricing is fair. We provide you that market transparency, and we negotiate with the counterparty to make sure that we both see the market at the same place to ensure that you're getting a market rate. That's our assurance we provide to you, and we provide to the bond counsel from a tax perspective when we need to integrate transactions with bonds, which is what we'd be doing here in your case. We coordinate all the review of documentation associated with this, answer questions that come up with respect to document review and trade conflicts, things like that. But really, we're there as your advocate through this whole process. So in any way, we're there to help answer questions, explain, educate, and so on and so forth. I talked a little bit about our pricing capabilities. We do have the resources to price these types of deals. We have live market pricing. We do this a lot with all the major dealers. We're fairly active in this market and know the desks that price these types of transactions. Flipping on to page 6, getting a little bit into your situation, my understanding is that you've got an older series of bonds that were issued to the State Public School Building Authority back in 2007, just over 37 million outstanding today. They're ineligible to be advance refunded because they had already had advance refunded in prior series of bonds, so under tax law you cannot advance again. Your call date is not until April 17. Technically, you can issue 3 months before your call date and it would be considered legal. But the April 17th is your earliest date to be able to appease the debt. And the maturity date on them, I've got down, is April of 2030. And I think the plan was to keep the same tenor maturity date of the existing bonds. So, going down further on page 6, my understanding, based on my discussions with Lauren, is you're considering a rate lock, which is essentially done by way of a forward starting swap to try to capture today's economics, such that if rates rise, you'll get a payment that will subsidize the borrowing rates that you would then have to take on. Or if rates decline, you're going to have to make a payment to subsidize the counterparty for the rate decline that had occurred to make you whole to where you are today, essentially. So it's a general rate hedge that you're entering into. It's really a hedge on absolute rates, not necessarily hedging of credit, or not a hedge on any kind of external market factors. For example, the Pennsylvania state budget is still in flux. If there's a problem there, this is not going to hedge any kind of external impact that may affect your market. It's just going to be a rate hedge. And there's still going to be basis risk associated with that. Basis risk meaning that rate hedge that you enter into is not exactly a municipal market rate hedge. It's just a general rate hedge. So you're not going to completely, perfectly hedge what's called the municipal market data scale. It's the scale that you use to price tax-exempt securities. I think I mentioned that at the time you enter into the trade, you would price it, a week or two after you approve your leaving this separate approval in earlier mid-April. You enter into the trade, and the idea would be to terminate it the day it would become effective. That termination must occur. It's a mandatory termination, so whether you issue the bonds or not, you're going to either owe a payment or receive a payment, depending on which way the rate market has moved. If you owe a payment and you issue the bonds, obviously you fund that payment out of bond proceeds. If you receive a payment, that payment is used to downsize your debt. What else? The index that I believe is under consideration and is most common when you're trying to do this kind of rate hedge would be either doing it on a SIFMA basis or on a percentage of LIBOR basis. SIFMA is the tax-exempt short-term index. It's a weekly 7-day rate reset, representing a portfolio of high-grade variable rate bonds in the municipal market. And then there's a LIBOR, a percentage of LIBOR, which is a fairly common taxable index that folks use for this type of rate block. your SIFMA index essentially retains the tax risk associated with the deal. So in other words, if you swap against SIFMA, any kind of change in marginal tax rates between now and when you price your bonds, that essentially is within your hedge in some way. If you price it against percentage of LIBOR tax rates or marginal tax rates change, the tax exemption may not be as valuable when you sell your bonds. And rates at that point may have risen more so than LIBOR would have, because LIBOR doesn't have that kind of impact. So in one case, you retain the tax risk, which would be in your percentage of LIBOR swap, and in your SIFMA swap, you're sort of offloading that and buying some of that insulation. Should that occur, this is talking about drastic change in tax law that would make these two diverge. And again, these cannot provide perfect hedges to your municipal borrowing costs. Many other factors are going to, potentially interfere with this, but it's again a hedge on absolute rates. Any questions so far? I know I'm kind of going through this really quick, a little bit of me to gloss over it. And I know you've probably heard this from the folks at RBC, who's some of this reinforcement of some of this stuff. Page 7 specifically gets into the two hedges that are under consideration. I've had the chance to speak to the folks at RBC just to get a sense of what their market was on some of this stuff. And I'm fairly close in what they're seeing as far as forward premium that would be imposed on you by pricing today, effective early next year. And, they've given me their proposal as far as what they want to charge from a dealer perspective to be the counterparty in this transaction. And it's fairly common to pay dealer costs. It's representation of credit and their profit and loss on these types of deals. The SIFMA hedge is a less liquid market, so its forward costs and its transaction costs on the dealer side is a little more expensive as opposed to your LIBOR rate. And just going down the LIBOR, you can see that forward premium is a little lower, as is the dealer cost. I think the folks from RBC have in the past talked about doing a rate lock to April of 17, which is your call date. Technically, you can price bonds anytime you get within that 3-month window and still have considered a current funding. So I just kind of looked at the forward premium and said, okay, what happens if you do it early December? How much does that take off from a forward rate premium perspective? And you get a little bit of that back. So if I go look at the SIFMA hedge, you're about 13 basis points forward premium if you set your termination date to December. But you've got to be ready to go in the market on December of 2016. And then you would close Jan 1 of 2017. That's your earliest, again, date for your call. If you want a little more flexibility, you could do that trade to April of 17, and then you can terminate in advance of that April 1 date. And should you do that, technically, presumably you'd be buying back some of that forward premium that you have not earned from the day you terminate to April. So it's not a complete loss if you decide to buy yourself a little more protection and say, okay, we want flexibility to determine when we want to terminate, as opposed to having to terminate on December 1, regardless of whether they sell a bond. So just another way to look at it. And then the same analysis I show below is on LIBOR basis. 12 basis points, and then coming down to 9 if you want to do that on December 1. Any questions on any of this so far? So the question becomes, what's the best index really to use for this type of hedge arrangement? And I know the folks from RBC, showed you a chart of what 10-year SIFMA was, 10-year LIBOR, and your 10-year MMD rate. But what you want to do is look at which of the indexes move as much as your 10-year MMD rate is going to move, as opposed to what the absolute rate is and what the averages are, and so on and so forth. So what page 8 tried to do is really identify the relationship between MMD and SIFMA and MMD and LIBOR, and a few statistical analysis I show on the right-hand side really point to both being highly correlated. This is sort of a correlation coefficient analysis that we did here, just looking back over the last 5 years. But you can see that that LIBOR is a little more closely correlated to the level of movement relative to the level of movement in MMD. which for you is a good thing because that's a cheaper market to get into. It's a little more liquid. It's a cheaper market to get out of. It's a cheaper market as opposed to simple. Except you do want to take on the tax risk. So again, if there's an issue with respect to changing marginal tax rates between today and when you issue, or any kind of tax law change that may modify the relationship between taxes and the taxables, you're not insulated from that on a percentage of liable trade as much as you would be on something. So I would just keep that in mind. And just continuing on here, on to page 9, most of the stuff I've reiterated here, but a couple of some of the same points. It's not a perfect hedge. You have to pay this or you receive a payment, whether you issue bonds or not. There are transaction costs, so even if rates don't go anywhere today, and you issue your bonds at today's exact rates, you're going to owe a payment because you're going to owe that small amount of transaction costs and forward premium that you have to pay to move the trade. And so you really need a little bit of a rate rise in order to recoup that. As far as it's just cost of an, it's like I read RBC in their cost of an advance refunding, setting up an escrow and the efficiencies associated with that. That's actually not a bad way to compare something like this versus what a standard advance refunding inefficiency would yield you. This really is one of the most cost-effective ways to hedge rate movements. I'm sure RBC talked to you a little bit about doing a forward premium, a forward bond sale, where you pay a premium on a per-month basis in order to sell the bonds today, but not close until December. It's pretty costly. It's about 5 basis points a month, which would diminish a lot of the economics here, which is probably why they proposed this as far as an alternative. The other thing to keep in mind, this is a short-term arrangement, but you will have an impact on your financial statements. There'll be a mark-to-market that you'll have to show on your June 30th financials associated with this trade, whether it's positive or negative, depending on what the market is moving. But that would be just for the fiscal year you're in now. You have to, that would be something you have to mark. And certainly, with swaps, and I believe the RBC folks know this with you, there are various risks associated with that, including counterparty tax, basis risk, there's market access risk, talk about the Pennsylvania state budget. If there continues to be problems and that starts to filter into your market, I'm sure you all very well what that could potentially pull. But nonetheless, they exist, so just want to keep it in mind. So that's really all I've got in here by way of this, but I'm happy to answer questions or engage in dialogue or anything specific to this. I also have the RBC piece. If we'll have this as well, I'm happy to go through this and answer questions as far as what they've shown, if that's helpful.
As our advisor, having had looked at their presentation, now we're looking at your presentation, it's a good overview. Could you give us your take? Is this a good thing? Is this something that you recommend us doing as much as you say recommend, or is this the right move?
It's if your position is we see rates rising, this is the most cost-effective way of doing this. Like I mentioned, the alternative would be a forward bond sale, which is costly. It really diminishes everything you're looking at here. As long as you're comfortable with going into the transaction costs and the risk associated with what may or may not happen, it's not a bad way to try to retain what you have today going into a bond sale.
Hi. One of the options that we haven't vetted all the way through is the forward bank loan on RBC's documents in Area 3. Would that be something that you could comment on now? I know there's no cost associated with that, and we haven't really heard much on that. Could you explain it?
Sure. This is similar to a forward bond sale, but probably doesn't come with the punitive rate penalty that a public forward bond sale would be associated with. So my guess here is that you would get a bank to give you a commitment today for closing in December or January, so they can meet those tax rules. And that rate that they're showing here, which I'm going to say is about a 328, incorporates that forward cost to commit those funds today to have them available for you in December. That is a better alternative than trying to do a bond sale in public markets. If you don't want to consider doing a derivative, it certainly isn't, if you've got, if you're looking at today's market and you go nowhere today, the swap's going to keep you in a better place. But the bank loan can take away a lot of those market risks that you wind up incurring when you do a derivative. So I don't know if this is their bank that proposed this or if this is just something that they provide as an indication.
I think that's what they said, that they found a bank that would be able to provide that.
Okay, so they're saying a bank would come in and be able to do this. Okay.
Would you be able to also provide banking options for competitive purposes if we hired your services?
We
So we
could
kind of shop that option
Yeah,
around?
we could as an FA. We've done that before for a few borrowers to do a forward bank loan who have the same situation where you can't advance your fund because you're in a non-advance refundable issue. So we could explore that. We could solicit interest to see if folks would be willing to give that, bid that out and see how low that rate would go. That's an alternative we'd like to consider.
Is that in essence like getting a bank loan for the term from 2017 to 2030 plus the 9 months between then and now? Is that basically like we would get a loan, start making a payment on the loan now, and then when the bond 2007 matured, we would use the proceeds of that bank loan to pay off the
I don't think you would actually start incurring the payments on the bank loan today. You would just lock the rate in, and you wouldn't start, that bank loan wouldn't get issued until December or January. You would continue with your normal bond payments as is.
Okay, and someone would make that payment, that promise today without, the bank would make that promise without any premium, any upfront fees?
You probably have to pay a bank commitment fee, yes, for that. And then the forward premium is going to be in the rate that they offer you. They're going to incorporate that forward cost in whatever they give you as far as the bank loan rate.
And do you agree that the savings would be conservatively 2.3 million roughly, as RBC estimated?
I'd have to run the numbers myself. I didn't dig into this side of the analysis. I could.
So if we decided just to be consult with you on the bank loan option, would we have to then sign the full $13,000 agreement with you, or could you pay? Could we?
They already did that.
You already did
What?
that.
We already
You already
engaged their
approved it.
services at the last meeting. That's why
1
she's
week
here.
ago, we already approved them. We had to actually hire
I thought we
her before
agreed.
they could come in here and make a
Okay,
presentation.
all right, thank you. I'm done with questions.
And I think you guys talked about the bank loan with respect to this to some extent already. I don't.
A little. A little bit.
Okay.
I was wondering, I'm assuming that there's other institutions out there other than RBC that do the swap or do this hedge. Is it worthwhile for us to competitively bid that?
I was looking, you would do that to negotiate down that premium, that 6 and 7 basis point cost, that dealer cost. And if you were to go competitive, could you get that down? Probably. If you went to RBC and said, look, we're considering doing this on a competitive basis, they may be willing to negotiate. Now, I haven't even opened up this discussion with them yet. So, as far as they're concerned, that's still on the table part of my job is to say, okay, this is what market participants are charging for this trade, or, this is not, let's talk about it. What you may want to do is just engage in that dialogue with them and see if we can get them to a level where, you're close to where you'd be on a competitive basis. So that'll cost you a little more to run that process, but.
Right, okay. And my other questions, because I don't necessarily understand the 6 plus the 12 basis points. Who is that, the 12 basis points for the forward premium? Who does that go to?
That is just what the market charges. I mean, that's going to go to RBC as the swap counterparty. That's part of.
So they're basically insuring, they're kind of insuring the rate to an extent.
But that's what the market charges for that. That RBC isn't saying, we're going to charge you 12 basis points. Like, I'm able to price this out and see there's a 12 basis point market view on what forward rates are between today and April of 17.
Okay.
You know, their only subjective quote here are the 7 and the 6 points of dealer spread that goes right to their P&L.
Okay. Thank you.
So, obviously, Mrs. Bites has a concern about the risk that we can't control with the hedge. And just to clarify, you're commenting on the difference between the assessment and LIBOR. So, in reality, in theory, if tax rates were to go down, again, this right, then the municipal bond is not worth as much, so then potentially the rates have to go up to compensate. So if you think rates are going to go down, or tax rates are going to go down, then that SIPA might not be a good, but the chances of tax rates going down, I think, are probably pretty slim.
Especially between now and January, or, you know, December, whenever you want to term it. It would be within that window that would have to occur. Because your trade is going to be short.
Yeah. But is it within your purview then of what we're paying for you to come back as our advocate and comment Mrs. Bites whether the bank loan would be what the advantages would be to that, what the pros and cons would be, and we'd say yes, we would say X, and that would be what a guarantee number as opposed to what taking the swaps would do for us.
And the bank loan world is a little bit more into the financial advisory side of things. You know, we do that. If you want to evaluate other planes of finance, you know, I think it would be taking a step back from what you're looking at here and, you know, going to some banks and just taking the temperature. And I'm presuming that's what RBC did here to give you this.
Yeah, I mean, just, you know, just so you know, I mean, on my own, I went out just to get a couple contacts with some folks out in the banking industry. And they said, great, that RBC at the time gave us the most competitive rate that they use as an example. So I don't doubt their numbers.
But if I'm not mistaken, the cost-benefit analysis is pretty obvious, right? I mean, you lock in a lesser savings if you go the bank route and you pass the risk onto the bank. Or you take the risk yourself with the possibility of greater, you know, of retaining more of the original savings. So I mean,
and those
I don't
risks
think it
are
would
the
be
ones that those really kind of nebulous risks that if the bond market blows up in essence.
right. So my only point is that I don't think that Sandra or her firm is in a position to assess the cost-benefit analysis. Should be clear. You either say, I'm comfortable with taking the risk, we're comfortable with taking the risk ourselves, or we're not, in which case we go with the bank. But then you diminish the savings generated from the refinancing.
There's also other risks in bank loans compared to bonds that you would want to make sure that you're comfortable with. You know, just for example, a bank fixed rate is not the same as a public market fixed rate. Bank fixed rates are littered with a bunch of language that talks about capital adequacy laws and tax rate. I mean, all that stuff gets passed on to you should there be regulatory changes. That's very hard to negotiate out of bank loan documents. Public bonds, you're totally insulated from that. All that's passed on to the investor. So you start to get into some of that discussion and, you know, do you want to go into that market when you're looking at evaluating a pure bank loan versus, you know, doing a public bond deal or swapping it. You may also find, you know, for some reason if public markets aren't accessible and you've got to terminate this trade, you know, you may be able to find a bank loan to get you where you need to be, you know, for the time being. I'm just, you know, giving worst case if public markets are inaccessible, then you probably be competing with others to do the same thing, but nonetheless, you know, there may be a back way at it if public markets aren't getting where you need to be.
Well, we don't have to actually refinance the bonds in April of 2017, correct?
No, we're not under any obligation to refinance.
Right.
That's correct.
have to cancel out the swap and pay.
Right, the issue is what, if the swap goes up, if those rates don't, or if the
Right, so
timing doesn't work.
There's
what
a
are we
market
supposed to do?
discontinuity, right?
Right, And I just get nervous when somebody tells me they can't quantify the worst case scenario. That's just me, especially because it's not my money. But
I understand what you're saying, and what you said might be true in the sense that people aren't willing to quantify what the worst case scenario is because it's based on where rates go and what the magnitude of the market discontinuity is. So while they can't tell us exactly what the worst case is, they can give us 10 different scenarios, right? And even assign roughly, in a rough case, they can assign probabilities to those scenarios as well. So there are ways to quantify the risk reasonably. It wouldn't be perfect, it'd be an estimate, right? But there are ways to quantify the risk if that's your central concern.
well, and I guess maybe even what would make sense to me is if the scenario of 2008 happened again, which nobody ever thought would happen, and it only happened for that brief time, what would that mean to us? I mean, can they run a scenario like that with that condition, since that's the worst condition known in history? I mean, then at least I have an idea of, are we talking
I mean, in essence, it means we would owe approximately $500,000 to pay off the swap, depending on the price when we get on it. And we probably have to sit on the current bond issue for maybe a few months until markets actually came back to their senses.
That's not true, Dave. The cost of the termination of the swap could be vastly in excess of $500,000.
Right, if it was $100
You're
million.
talking about if rates went down a lot, right? That cost us.
Yeah, that's
issue-
what the worst case
the-
of the swap is if rates go down. You could say if rates go down to zero.
So if rates go down, then we would reissue the bond, because, I think that back because
they're
you're right,
offsetting
there's
risk.
still the LIBOR and it could be total disconnected.
But that's the issue that doesn't get protected.
Right, the disconnect.
If the rates go down, the cost of issuing is so much lower
Right.
that it's a natural hedge, right? So that's not really the situation that we're concerned about. What we're concerned about is a situation where the markets behave in such a way such that the index that we hedge with does not correlate well with the actual market.
And we would
Right.
be okay if
And-
rates went up, right, because then we would make money.
That it's not a function of how the rates move, it's a function of how the two different markets move together or apart. I mean, it's a part that hurts us. If they move in lockstep, it doesn't matter where rates go. The hedge covers the movement. The issue is when the market that you've used as a hedge moves in a way that's very different from the instrument that you're trying to hedge, because they're not exactly the same. And in that situation, that's when the costs can increase dramatically.
That's your basis risk.
Right. So my point is just that, and Sandra, I'm sure can confirm this, there's no, the termination cost of the swap could be way in excess of the $500,000. That's the estimate in RBC's proposal of the cost of the hedge.
Right, and that cost assumes that there's no rate movement. That's today. That's the issue in today's rate environment. That's just the transaction costs or premium and the dealer's costs that you would have to pay.
Right. I mean, their assumption, of course, is that the markets are going to behave, right? I mean,
Right, so that
and that's as good an assumption as any, because none of us can tell.
right.
So,
I mean, the best thing, you look back in history, you see how close a rate movement in SIFMA correlates to a rate movement in 10-year MMD, and how rate movement
Right.
in MMD to LIBOR.
I asked them specifically for the analysis that you did, so I was glad to see it today. I asked specifically for the correlations between the SIFMA and
That's the
MMD and
best way to
LIBOR.
determine which one is the best.
Exactly. But it also gives you an indication of, it doesn't just help provide which is the better index to use as a hedge. It also demonstrates how closely they do historically track to the market that we're trying to hedge.
Now, your example of 2008 is a good one, because if you were in a SIFMA swap, you would have been fine, because SIFMA rates spiked, as did the bond borrowing costs, but LIBOR did not. So you would be in this exact predicament if you took on a LIBOR swap and you had a 2008 happen, where SIFMA rates, because bonds were getting put back so dramatically that rates in the SIFMA wound up moving up very high. And fixed rates on the bond side or borrowing if we're having that kind of system. So anyway, and I think they mentioned that 2008 period, so I saw that in their presentation, highlighting that the two markets wound up diverging a little bit.
So, Mr. Arce, I understand your concern about the fact that the risk sounds unlimited, right? Because in some ways it is. The termination cost could be very, very high. It's just that the probability that you would assign to that cost would be very, very low, based on history. So that's all. They could, like I said, I'm guessing the RBC would be willing to provide scenarios that say, if the markets move in this way, this is what the cost would be, and this is the probability, to estimate probabilities, but once again, it'd be guesswork.
Well, and I understand it's guesswork, but I'm trying to figure out, like, even if it's just what happened previously happened, are we looking at 3 million? Are we looking at 6 million? Are we looking at, I don't want to put the district in a potentially worst case scenario, even if the probability is low. I mean, that makes me nervous. I don't know. And I know they can't pinpoint it exactly, but, I don't know. That's my opinion.
One more question. Are districts that do this, we're talking hedging and derivatives, is this considered appropriate or inappropriate for school districts to do this? Is this risky across the industry, or is this a generally accepted, restructuring practice?
Swap became a bad word after 2008, just by nature of what happened. And a lot of people were very nervous in doing trades close to the market. It is a risk. It's a risky derivative. You're taking on a risk instrument. In your case, though, it's a short-lived one. You're only in it for a year at most, you're historically the rate movement has correlated closely to the borrowing costs that you're trying to secure. You don't see. It's not like if you look back in history, you see a lot of erratic movements and a lot of divergence where it's okay. Maybe next year it's not going to be as consistent as it was in the prior year. It's pretty close. You kind of take calculated risks when you look at this stuff. It's not unreasonable to be evaluating this, and it's not unreasonable to say, okay, a percentage of LIBOR swap appears to be a good way to try to retain savings today, because we're afraid that rates are going to go up, and rates are very low. I mean, when you look at this swap, we price this as a fixed rate swap. The market value on this fixed rate swap is a 118. I mean, imagine it going in, and that's out to 2030. You price it along the one-year curve. To think that drops is going to go down. But that's okay, because even if it goes down, your bonds are on the other side, presumably going up. It is a natural hedge. When we talk to borrowers about getting out of swaps to get into fixed rate markets, you try to time that one way or the other, but it doesn't matter because your exit costs are kind of a hedge to your borrowing costs going in. And that tends to be the case. I mean, it plays out fairly well.
For the record, Sandra, one, I'm an actuary. And two, when we had this conversation in the finance committee, I tried to explain that at this point, really the risk is asymmetric. Based on where we are on the curve relative to historical levels, right? That rates are more likely to rise than they are to go down because we're already at near historically low levels. So I mean, and that's the reason that we're even entertaining the possibility of making the hedge in the first place, right? So, I mean, once again, do you agree with that characterization that at this point it's an asymmetric risk? That's that based on historical data, it's an asymmetric risk at this point.
It's close. You're going to have noise there.
Sure.
The cash market is not going to be a replication of the contract market, but it's close. I think it's reasonable to look back and see the data and assume that, okay, this, based on what we've seen in the past, this could be used to hedge today's rate environment. I don't think that's a stretch to put it that way. As long as you know that things outside of that rate relationship could change your borrowing costs. If your credit rate deteriorates, or if the state's budget issues just cause Pennsylvania paper to have a problem, selling, I mean, those things are going to interfere with this. Other systemic market, well, that's going to be on the great side, but credit spreads could widen out. Even if your credit costs, even if you stay a AA rated entity, if rates rise, credit costs widen out. And that could affect what you're trying to hedge and the cost you have to take on when you actually borrow the money. So as long as you understand those dynamics, what could happen, and you're comfortable with that.
I have one other quick question. I don't know if it makes sense or if it's possible, but to address some of the concerns, is it possible to structure the swap with a limit on it that would sell and back to a certain price that would
Like a cap?
like a cap?
Well, the idea is that the swap offsets the bonds.
Correct. I'm saying if we get that dislocation, and is there, I don't know if it makes sense, but I mean, is there a way to have a bailout piece on it? That way we could cap our liability.
Well, you would want, so I think the question is, could we cap it if we see the muni markets going outside of where our hedge is? I don't know if you can buy a cap on a different market to apply in this case. And I don't know if you necessarily want that to interfere with the relationship. And a cap would be costly too. I mean, you'd be talking about economics here that may continue to erode. It's not a common tool. The swap is a more efficient way of doing it.
But what you said, the comment you had earlier, even though the system might cost more, it did behave better in 2008, so potentially the higher cost might be allaying our fears, per se?
Yeah, that's because that was due to the fact that the tax-exempt markets reacted differently than the general rate
Yeah,
market.
they were considered more obviously secure back then, I guess, than we.
Well, no, people were getting out of that. So you saw people pulling their money out of money markets, which are big buyers of the SIFMA index. That's why rates skyrocketed. They were trying to, because the money market funds, they broke the buck, the whole thing with the mass liquidation of those accounts. That's what caused SIFMA rates to rise. But the credit markets froze up, so people couldn't get into the public markets and borrow because the cost of capital was so high and money was tight. Investors were on the sidelines, they weren't buying.
Which is, I think, why we got into our first one.
I'm sorry, that's,
I think we hit the issue right at the time that
oh, and this deal is so sudden?
with a different.
A different deal? You probably had to stay put for a little bit to let that.
Just one more quick question. Obviously, the outcome of this swap could affect our credit rating. Could it, just entering into it, affect our credit rating?
The rating agencies are going to look at whether you have derivatives, and then they're going to look at characteristics underlying it, if you have a credit support, some of the specifics that are associated with this. It won't affect the rating, but they're going to note it in the report. I think S&P actually does like a number system. They used to do the debt derivatives profile, it's called. And they'll say, okay, your rating is AA and a number 2 assigned to your derivative. 1 is least risky and 5 is most risky. And you have a number 2 because, the schedule to the ISO, which is the credit behind the swap, is very favorable to the borrower. The counterparty risk is very low because you have a strong counterparty. The swap is very short, or it matches the credit component of the bond issue, things like that. They'll look at those and assign, but it's
Qualified.
yeah, it would be like a qualifier to the rating. But I don't know if it's going to it'll change your rating from one to the other. And this is like I said, it's a short trade.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Sure.
Okay, we'll move to item 11, personnel approvals. As amended, do I have a motion?
Motion for amended as amended.
Second. Motion by Mr. Kurtz, second by Mr. Rathke.
Was that for A and B?
There's only, we amended,
Yes, we added,
yes, as amended.
Yes. B's the B's added.
Let's do that.
a voice vote, please.
This will be a voice vote for motion 11A and B as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 8-0.
Item 12, programs. Motion to approve the music department students out of state field trip.
Motion 12A.
Second. Any discussion?
Who's first? Kurtz was first, Rathgeb was second.
Hearing none, voice vote, please.
This will be a voice vote for motion 12A. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 8-0.
Do I have a motion for 12B?
There is no motion for that, it's a presentation.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Miller,
Yes, sir.
in the barrel, please.
I have no idea what she talked about. All I know is
The
we
next
read.
one will
But not the money that we're talking about.
Right, exactly. So we'll give you an update.
Hey, Scott? Yeah, that's what I hit, but nothing happened. I don't want to turn my phone off. Thank you. I did hit that. Kill him. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Dave.
All right, this is not going to be as long as the last time when you approved this project. I was told I was a little long-winded the last time, and we did the first 10 years of the history of Amity. So there's not that much left over. Anyway, what I wanted to do is give you a wrap-up of where we were. We had a very successful fun run, and we used team format at Amity. You're going to be seeing more of that towards the end. The person who is 98.9% responsible for the success we have is Celine Kraus, our guidance counselor. Celine, come on up. She was our team leader and more or less got this whole thing going, and she's going to take you through this much more briefly than I would. I'll hit that for you. How about that?
So you just want an overview of how the Booster Fund ran. Prior to the pep rally, the Booster Fund team came to our building to look at the gymnasium, whether we run the Booster Fund inside, outside, to meet with the teachers about what the program looks like since it's an 8-day program. So we had to order t-shirts, we had to get it, of course, approved by you guys, doing the contract, setting up the schedule, having the teacher meeting about how the pledges work and different incentives that they can incorporate in their classroom as a team. And then we figured a date for the pep rally, which was about a half-hour pep rally where they brought the whole school in to the gymnasium and they talked to the kids As you see, they're doing little magic tricks to get their attention. And then they talked about what Booster-thon was, how they would go about pledging. They would talk about the fun run, which was the end of the program. And they talk about Big World Recess, which I think we'll get into in some of these slides, which runs between the pep rally and the fun run. Staff on site for the pep rally and for the full week. So they had about 4 members of Booster-thon people that really housed in guidance. They would come in and kind of stick around in the office. They had access to the funrun.com so they could keep tabs on pledges that were happening in the classrooms with families and students so that they could give out prizes to the kids through the day. And then we just talk about the program on a daily basis. Helping around the world, they have some program within Booster-thon that if certain classes reached, I think it's about $30 per lap, that they would ship sneakers off to some needy kids in another country. So you can imagine with how many pledges we have, we've shipped a lot of sneakers overseas for kids. And that's just part of their program. Big World Recess. So how this looks is you have the pepper rally on day 1. For then the 6 days following that, each day is a Big World Recess theme. So each day they talk about something with leadership, fitness, and character. So one day, for example, might be snowboarding. So they'd say snowboarding in Switzerland with confidence. So they would talk about how confidence kind of ties into snowboarding. And then the next day might be like, oh, we're going to play basketball in New York City. So they would have a video of New York City and kids playing basketball and how that ties into teamwork. And they talk about what teamwork is and how you can incorporate that in the classroom or in your daily life when you leave school. So each day there's a theme, running with endurance in Japan. So these are like 3 examples of 3 different days. That runs for 6 days. And then the last day is the actual fun run, where the students get a chance to run or walk a lap and tally up the laps that they did that tie into their pledge amount. Gym set up for the fun run. The people on staff from Booster-thon, the way we set up is a live version, so we paid 50% of the profit for the people to come in and do the work. So they're doing the pep rally, they're doing the Big World Recess, they're going into classrooms doing dance parties, if that was the incentive, giving the prizes, and they actually set up the gym. They use all their equipment, so everything you see in there is nothing that Daniel Boone owns themselves. They come in, they set up, and the kids run laps. The choice would be inside or outside, but since it was February, obviously we had it in the gym. 1 grade level at a time would go in, so if you had all 3rd grade, what they would do is, at AEC, 3rd grade is made up of 4 classrooms, so they would have 2 classrooms waiting under the tent, cheering on 2 classrooms that are running around, and then they'd swap. So there'd always be cheerleaders and runners.
And what you see is each class had their own customized flag that they developed. So you had the class pride within the school pride kind of idea.
Yeah, they have a team flag. Large corner video screen, again, this is all their technology that they used. They had a large truck that was parked outside of AEC that they would drive up in the morning. And the people that would come in, they're relatively close, Allentown, Philadelphia. This whole agency is based out of Atlanta, Georgia, but obviously they're not coming from there. They have different workers that come locally and drive to our building every day with a big truck with all this stuff.
The kids like watching themselves run as they came through the tunnel.
Yeah, they had the tunnel set up on the one side, light tracks around the big screen so they can see themselves running through the tunnel, and then the tents in the center.
And the different laps too. We talked about the music and what they would do with different laps.
Right. And if they would run it outside, they said that typically what they've done is they've had 2 separate tracks when they do it outside because they have the space. Shirts to keep track of laps. So part of this program is that all staff get free shirts. So we wore these ones made by Booster-thon, making a difference. These are the t-shirts that staff wear for the fun run, and they're free of cost. For the generic t-shirt, which we got was like $2, $1.99 a t-shirt, and that was paid from Student Council Association to upfront. As you can see, the back of the t-shirt, they can mark the laps that they're doing, so we had staff and Booster-thon people at near where on the other side of the tunnel where the kids would walk or run the lap, and then they'd stop and they'd get their lap checked so that we knew how many laps at the end that they did. And then the kids got to obviously take these home and keep them. Grandparents and parents joined in. They came. We had the bleachers down so the parents and grandparents or other family members, aunts, uncles, could watch, and then they could come join when the session was over for that grade level to walk a lap with their child or relative. Signature wall is just something that we decided would be fun for the students when they were done doing the laps. They could come out of the gym before they were dismissed to go back to class to sign the wall with the marker, sign their name, that they completed the fun run. And we had that up until today.
The gym, that's how long that is.
Yeah. So that was just part of the decorating piece. At the end, because we met our goal, so the goal going in was, I think, 15,000 was what Booster-thon people said was probably a realistic goal, 15,000 based on their experience working with schools of our size and similar communities. So we actually raised over 35,000, but they get they get half of it because they're on the scene every day helping us run this. So, but yeah, in our minds, we were saying, well, if 15,000 is what you think is safe, that's great. And we came out pocketing 17,000 to go towards the nature center. Because we met the goal, we set up after the fun run a date, which was the incentive for the school that if we reached the goal, Mr. Miller would get duct tape and pied in the face. That's what the students voted on. And staff voted.
What was the other option?
Students and staff voted.
Bricks.
If you didn't meet the goal, then they wouldn't have this event.
I'm disappointed the board wasn't invited.
Well, you see Erin Siegel down in the lower right. She had a good time jamming that pie. It took me 3 days to get pie out of my nostrils and my ears. You ate it, didn't you? I'd be at a bus duty and kids would go by and say, "Mr. Miller, you still have some pie in your ear."
For a snack later on in the day.
No, I'm telling you, those pies were delicious.
They were real pies. They were real pies, yeah.
Just whipped cream.
Yeah.
They were real pies.
And like Mr. Harris was saying, what would you do? But they were excited through the way because this was a school-wide incentive, but each day there was a classroom incentive. Like part of that teacher meeting was that the group of first grade teachers decided if our classroom, we get 10 pledges, is that going to be, no homework today? Or 20 pledges, crazy hair day, 15 pledges, pajama day. So they had something to look for every day that I don't know that it would be a huge disappointment had we not met the 17,000 or 15,000.
For those of you keeping track, it took 2 full rolls of duct tape to hold me to the wall, and it helped.
And they pulled the chair out, which was awesome because the kids were like, pull the chair, and staff was saying it too. And just to pull the chair out, and he was hanging there. So
It's a weird
duct
feeling.
tape. It was the Booster-thon people that duct taped him.
All right, so the next steps, and Celine, like I said, she did a fantastic job. She was the lead on this whole project, and it was a massive undertaking. If you saw her office, it was full of T-shirts and all kinds of other stuff. For weeks, not just days, for weeks. Prizes, all kinds of things. So basically tonight, we're giving you the board update and the review of the plans. We have a parent advisory committee now of very talented parents in our school who are helping to plan the Nature Center. So we have Jen DeMild, Heidi Fisher, and Natalie Bischoff, who are our parents, and the lead on that particular team is Adrian Evans, our gifted teacher. Former school director Walt Shaheen was on campus today. He's coordinating the Boy Scout work. All we're doing is buying raw materials, and then the Boy Scouts are doing all of that work. The Girl Scouts are going to be building benches. They may or may not be using a lot of raw materials because there are a lot of fallen trees where they're going to try and incorporate them into building the benches along the trail. The Student Advisory Committee has lunch, what's called working lunch with me once a week, and they have a ton of ideas and a lot of sketches that they put together. So they really enjoy being a part of the planning of this whole thing. Mr. Harris and I have been working on some business partnerships as well. We tried a little breakfast thing that didn't fizzle, it kind of fizzled out on us last week. But you know, we tried it, see how it would work. Only one company has flat out said no. So there are several, I don't want to name any companies and have them feel pressure or anything like that. But several companies are interested in sponsoring particular items or donating to this whole effort here. We're going to have a spring work day for volunteers. We were just talking about that with Walton Boy Scouts today. And of course, anybody who donates anything, we're going to put a little placard on there honoring their donation. So that's the update. Anybody have any questions? It was $17,226.01. That's what we raised. Yes. So we did very well.
I have one question, and I'm sorry, our solicitors here, but so if we have volunteers on site, including Boy Scouts and underage, is that an issue as far as liability or?
Well, we have insurance coverage for that.
That's all good. Okay.
Always liability with insurance.
And those are Eagle Scout projects, I should say, too. So they're going to be earning their Eagle Scout rank, as a result of that. So it's kind of a win-win on both sides.
Did it live up to the slogan of fun on steroids?
Absolutely,
All right.
it did, no doubt about it. In fact, I saw that principal last week, and I said, you were exactly right.
All right.
It was exciting. It was exciting. And what amazed me was Celine was talking about the fun run, and just about every fun run, the stands were packed with parents and grandparents. It was full.
Maybe there's a way to work that next year into something in the classroom? Or
Yeah, maybe.
Grandparents' day run.
And the Boosterthon people, I don't know how many papers they graded, but they graded a lot of papers for teachers during that week. So teachers were very happy to have them around, let me tell you.
I have a question, Mr. Miller.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
applaud your effort, and I'm glad it was a success, but it looks like it took a lot of time away from instruction. Could you give us some sense of that?
I didn't take any away, and I'm glad you asked that question. What we did is we incorporated it during the specials periods. So that was when the fun run took place, was when they would usually have art, music, something like that. That was the day of the fun run. When they did the huddles, we did them in between lunch and recess.
Nice, thank you.
So it was a 15-minute period each day, and that was it.
Can I have the total again, please?
$17,226.01.
Thank you.
Now, we do have to reimburse, if you remember, we did a $2,000 deposit. We're reimbursing that fund, and we're reimbursing student council for the t-shirts. So that will be done as well. So, I don't know that. I honestly don't know that. I didn't do the math on subtracting those. I'm guessing we're going to be around 14,000 that we're going to be able to put towards the nature center.
What's your total projected budget for that?
Well, that's what we're still working on, because we've got to work with the township, see what we can do, what we can't do, all those kinds of things. Right now, we're probably looking total around 40 to 45,000 for the whole project when it's done. So that's why we'd like to do this again next year, with your permission.
But that expense is without making participation for visitors.
Correct. And grants. We've also applied for a lot of grants as well. So we may have that amount, by the time we're done. I've talked to a couple of places where we've applied for grants, and, that with that approval or not approval will be coming in May. So we'll know by then. And then I can give you a further update at that time. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you letting us come and give you an update.
I would like to say a special shout out to Ms. Press.
She did a terrific job. And thank Ms. Bites. Thank you.
He's going to hit the off switch.
Yeah. Oh, looking to the light. Okay. Ooh. Blue light. Blue light.
Okay,
Recorded.
Move to number 13, policy.
We need to do, okay, 13. Do you have anything about the policy?
Do you have any updates on policy and anything you want to discuss?
Still reviewing.
We're still reviewing, policy 110.
Yeah.
I don't know. Report
That's all right.
here. I'll give it to you next time.
Old business. Anything to talk about with the old business items?
Just chime in quickly for the public budget presentation. I saw a news article regarding the state budget, and seeing as this is Mr. Martino's normal talking point here, so he's not here, I'll take it up. There's talk about a good number of Democrats peeling off in the state Senate, the state House, and joining Republicans in trying to override the governor's veto. It turns out that a lot of their schools, as the rural Democratic seats, they're beginning to close their doors, that there's no 15-16 budget in place soon. So you're beginning to see, it looks like the dam is starting to break a little bit. I just thought that was worth sharing, that it doesn't take too many to break off and join the Republicans to override the veto, and it looks like it's starting to happen. So there's reason to be at least a little bit optimistic.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz. If there's nothing else on old business, we'll move to new business. Under 15, do I have a motion for 15A?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Dowski, second by Mr. Kurtz. Take your time.
Who seconded that, I'm sorry?
Mr. Dowski made the motion, Mr. Kurtz seconded the motion.
Mr. Potts?
Mr. Kurtz.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion?
Any discussion? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Okay, this will be a roll call vote for motion 15A. Mr. Scott?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
He got confused with his first name. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mrs. Twardowski?
Yeah.
Mrs. Bites, yes. Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Gissonneal?
Yes.
Mr. Potts?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, 15B, motion to approve Mr. Potts on the following committees. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Kurtz, second by Ms. Twardowski.
Are you going to abstain from this vote? Okay.
Doesn't have to say it.
Yeah. Do you have that? Ms. Bice, do you have that? Who made the motion in second?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there any discussion?
Mr.
If not, I just wanted to let everyone know that Mr. Potts did share concern about serving on the Transportation Commission, as his company does a lot of business with many of the transportation companies. And after discussing with Mr. Opus and Neil and Mr. Potts, we felt that his knowledge of the industry would be very beneficial to keep him on that committee. Since the committee's basically making recommendations to the full board, if something would come up that he felt was a conflict, he could abstain at that time. But we just wanted to let everyone know we did have that conversation. If there's no other comment, can I have a roll call vote, please?
This will be a roll call vote for motion 15B. Mrs. Twardowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Bites, yes. Mr. Kurtz?
Yes.
Mr. Opus O'Neill?
Yes.
Mr. Potts?
Abstain.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Scott?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. 1 of 7, 0, 1.
Okay, the last item, 15C, we'll have a discussion about the newsletter, about a spring edition. I think, from a lot of our concern the last time was the cost of the distribution. Did asked Mr. Small and Mr. Harris to look into that. I know Mr. Martino, having intimate knowledge of the Postal Service, already had pointed out there was significant savings we could have achieved by sending out, I guess, there's a bulk rate, whatever, I'm not sure what the exact description was. So I guess it's kind of a twofold question. I think, first of all, is the board supportive of continuing on with this newsletter? And then if we decide to move forward with it, can we look at doing it in a cost-effective manner? So, Mr. Small or Mr. Harris, do you have any comments about the cost?
Since this happened before Mr. Harris arrived on scene, the issue that developed as far as the cost of production centered around the necessity to move it to a print shop that had a large enough web press to handle the format that the PR firm was using. I had contacted BCTC at the time to see if they could help us with just too large a format for them. Subsequent to that, I talked to the gentleman at the BCTC, and he's eager to talk to us. Moving forward, if we put the paper itself in a format that will meet with their equipment and work with us on the production and the distribution.
As a real quick, I would highly recommend you contact the IU as well. I think that you find to be very competitive and the print shop over there.
Thank you, Ms. Rathke. That's a good idea. So I guess, what we would really look like is have some information to look at for what that cost would be compared to what we paid before, so we can start working back. The question is then, who's going to develop the newsletter for us? As you know, we did agree to use that PR firm for that one issue. I'm not sure if that committed this for future issues. No. Okay. So, any conversation along those lines of what your
I thought
thoughts
we could
are?
replicate the model that went out. I got very good feedback within the community about that mailing. People that aren't engaged really liked, that don't come to these meetings, were very impressed with it. I heard from members of the business community. So I'd like to see us explore it in a more economical way. So, and maybe follow some of the model that was in that as a template, just with updated numbers, and then touch on the new issues that our the business office is dealing with.
Yeah, I think what's important to remember, this is a document of the board design of news that we want to get out directly to the public. And I did have similar comments from people like, hey, I didn't know that these things are going on. I think a lot of people, since the attendance here is pretty sparse, they get their information from the newspapers, but not everybody reads the newspapers, has time to do that. So I think anytime you can put information directly in the hands of your consumer, it's best. It's the best. In my opinion, the only thing I would change is I would like maybe a little bit more about the student accomplishments. But I think the template in general, as far as what the board's doing to try and control costs, the programs that we're working on, some of the things that's exciting happening in the district, our continued refinancing. I think the public, should and probably wants to know that information.
I think we have a lot to tout, too, as a district since that last newsletter went out, in that we're now partnering with Rosemont and the Coral Reef Project. I mean, we're just a premier site for that.
Just even Blazer Summer.
Blazer Summer. We have so
that's
much to share that I think the community would be genuinely interested in. And the AP accommodation
The
recognition.
great thing about the newsletter is that we can reach folks, there's 20-some thousand residents in the school district, and only what percentage of those students families have students in schools. The vast majority of people who live in the school district are directly connected with the schools. So we represent those folks as well, and I think it's important that we communicate with those families. And in terms of Blazer Summer, I mean, this is an entirely new market that we could be reaching. The folks who don't, again, maybe it's a private school, they still want to participate in Blazer Summer. I think that would be.
At-risk
Well,
kindergarten?
the thing is, we have this timely now, you know, it may be, by the time this would come out, it'd be too late for this year's Blazer Summer. But to make people aware that that's something we're
Speaking of that, when the deadline is, what, June?
Well, we're having the kickoff tomorrow. We're having kickoff tomorrow at the high school.
Like, if I want to wait till the last minute.
I don't know, but the kickoff is tomorrow at 6:30 at the high school.
All right, kick off tomorrow at 6:30.
Yes.
So who would be our pilot, who would be our kind of pilot person within the district? So that if we wanted to, the board wanted to brainstorm and say, look, you know, make sure this gets mentioned, this gets mentioned, this gets mentioned, would that be, who do you think would be piloting it, driving it within the district?
I would.
Sandy probably, right? She has some.
I would say the principals and Lauren and myself and Rob. I mean, we're the most in touch with what's happening on the school level. Lauren in the business office, myself and Rob. You know.
So we could send our comments to you to make sure.
If you send them to me, and I'll send them out, make sure we're all connected and aware of what's going on.
If we could get it under a manageable expense, I'd love to have it routinely, you know, a couple times a year. But we do have to get the price down, even if we got to scale down the size of it, you know, the paper, because I think that's what Lauren's saying, it's the size of that original paper, you know.
Well, I mean, if we look
Scale
at it,
that
start
down.
working backwards, you know, for what the, you know, obviously if we're paying the IU or BCTC, you know, we're in essence paying ourselves a portion of it. I guess we would work back, what format can they handle? And then look,
Yeah,
go
it's a
forward
great
to, you know, what the formats of a vendor that can do this for us, and if they can achieve that. Can we task the administration with doing that? Okay.
Do
we
we
wouldn't
want
charge
to
that
vote
much.
to push, to go forward?
Yeah,
Is that
well, I'll
something
pay you
we wanna-
everything I'm making for tonight's meeting, put it that way. Is there any other discussion? No? Okay.
That's what the price costs. Yeah.
I have,
I found out that information, in case anybody's wondering when Blazer Summer, when the deadline ends. It is June 11th at 11:55 p.m., so have a while.
It's still a pretty tight schedule for, we got to move on it.
Sure.
Identify someone to create it in a format that the IU or BCTC can handle. Okay. Is there any presentations by the public on any issues?
Shane Cockle, 830 Geigertown Road. I looked on your website today to read the agenda, and it said that there was going to be a presentation on the budget and a public PowerPoint showing a pie chart of the district expenses. Why wasn't this done tonight if it's on your agenda?
It's that part of our agenda we agreed would be used to keep track of issues that are ongoing. We felt that having a budget presentation without knowing any real numbers at this point is not very helpful.
But is that legal to do, to put something on the agenda to say you're going to do? I would have came tonight if there wasn't going to be a budget presentation.
I can go in there, I think, for...
I came last time.
It's
So,
under the category, it's under, like, if you look at 14 is old business and then A is action list. Maybe, I think we need to do a better job articulating what that action list means. That's just the list of things we've been talking about doing, but
action, I thought meant you're taking action.
Yeah.
And you're going to be presenting the budget tonight.
Fair enough.
So,
what wording would you suggest?
Actually, if you look at our past ones, it listed on there It had a date at the middle school was our original, but that's been pulled off of that. It actually had a date at the middle school when we were planning on doing it, but now that's no longer on that, so I can see.
So,
Paused.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
keep the date on it, it's to be determined.
TBD.
And then,
But what happens if I'm not here when the budget is being presented?
I'll call you.
Let's get that on the website.
No, I mean, we will move that up to
I
a
mean, it should
different
be
category.
pretty clear that this night we will be speaking about
Fair enough.
the budget.
Your point is taken.
Okay, thank you.
But it was good to see you again.
Sorry, Shane.
Good evening, my name is Lori Hogue. I did attend the facilities meeting, so I'm going to reiterate a little bit because the rest of the board is here. And moving forward in negotiating your custodial services and maintenance is my concern. The cleanliness at the high school is at the lowest point, to the point where the health and risk of the students and staff is at dire need. I was at the high school and I volunteer a lot of times, and I was just cleaning out one room. We found a bottle of urine, food, a dead rodent, urine smells, and some sewer smells. It's really bad. The auditorium is currently being used at a higher rate than usual because of the amount of study halls that are going on with 80 to 100 students during multiple times throughout the day. The auditorium does not get cleaned. There are spills, there are crud on the floor, there's spider webs. So if you think about the germs that are constantly going on, that the students are passing along to each other. The bathrooms also at the high school need dire needs. It looks really bad. There's one sink in the bathroom. Smells so bad that after the janitor cleaned it, he still had to open the windows to the bathroom because the smell was so bad in there. In talking about, that's one thing I want to point out, and another issue was the multiple study halls that the students have this year. And looking for an alternative plan, and I'm sure this is something you're currently working on, but I'm bringing it from the point where my students, my children are constantly complaining, is the lack of substitutes in our district, where we're constantly having at least, I know last week my daughter had 4 study halls that were not in her schedule for core students, core teachers that they had, that their teachers were out, couldn't get substitutes, and they sat in 4 separate study halls that day and only had 1 class and 2 encore classes. So that's really becoming a big issue, and it's something that we need to address at Danny Boone Health when we move forward with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I have a question, Lynn. Was Mr. Harris, are you going to start tracking like the reasons and see if we could somehow predict the need for subs coming up in the future or something?
We currently do review when teachers are out. Mondays and Mondays and Fridays are the highest days. When teachers, per their contract, can take sick days. So if a number of teachers become ill on a certain day, they use their contractual right to take off. The other day, I can tell you, I got a call from the principal of the high school. There were 17 teachers off. We cannot staff for 17 teachers being out at one time. At the other schools, I checked with the elementaries and middle school, they had a couple. It's random. We're looking at contracting with a sub-service. Even that won't be 100%. We're also looking at another model that I can't discuss right now, but teachers would sub for each other per period. And there would be a fee for that. So those are 2 things we're looking at. The third thing I have to look at, and I'll say publicly, is morale. When people are happy to come to work, they come to work. So when the building's clean, people will want to come to work. When people are treated fairly, they'll want to come to work. So I say we need to correct a number of things at the high school. Not just cleanliness or morale. I mean, we need to make sure people are feeling valued. So that's some of the things we're looking at. Okay, so once again, contractually, teachers are allowed to take a sick day if they feel ill. We cannot staff for more than 5 teachers out for subs. I mean, subs it's a disappearing field. It's very hard to find people to work randomly when you call them. That's why we're looking at a service to come in. And we'll take it from there. But even then, we could not staff if we have 25 people out district-wide. You know, we have a nursing issue. We're working at nurses for subs. We're trying to get people to come to work, make them feel valued in a positive environment, clean workspaces, textbooks available. We don't want them to leave. They're valued. I mean, we can't operate without teachers. But at the high school, we're working through a number of things. And cleanliness is one of them. I walked the high school the other day with the assistant principal, came up with a list of things, reported it. We're out there daily. You were in the facilities meeting, and it was discussed. So, but once again, teachers still need to come to work.
May I make one suggestion? In the past, some of our aides were able to substitute for us, but then they got penalized in pay when they did that, so they were disincentivized. I wonder if you could revisit that. That was, past practice.
That's one of the things we're looking at, but everyone in the building they have a duty. So when we move them from one duty, something else is being neglected. So an aide is usually one-to-one. It's part of a student's IEP. So now that student's needs are not being taken care of. So that's something that Rob and I looked at. We were at a job fair, and we met people, teachers who were aides at various institutions near here, and they said, hey, we would love to have you come in, and maybe becoming an aide is the way you become a teacher in this district. But once again, we're looking at a number of things. There's no fix-all for this.
In regard to the cleanliness issue, I know when I was in high school, I was actually at high school last week, and I thought it was better than when I was there. Now, that being said, wasn't much better, and it was pretty bad when I was in school. I mean, talking about rotting fruit on the walls of stairwells wasn't good. It's still not great. It's still not acceptable in my view. Is there a way we can get a plan, and if that might cost money, maybe to, I don't know, when last time the stairs, it seems like gum sticks to the stairwells in high school. Can the administration come forward with a plan to really clean that building thoroughly and to maintain it? Because when I was in school, I know you said that auditorium wasn't clean. It should be as simple as having somebody go through it with a vacuum cleaner, but it would be nice if there could be some type of action plan to really make that building look great. And it is sad because our middle school is beautiful. I mean, one of the floor of the lobby, there's a plaque for how clean the floors are. Our elementary schools are clean. I don't know what it is about high school, but if the administration could put together some type of plan to really clean that building, I'd be appreciative at least.
The building will be clean in 1 week.
In 1 week?
Go back through the building again. It will be cleaned in 1 week. Trust me.
Wow, great.
Thank you.
Mr. Wolf, I have one thing that I wanted to discuss in your business to remove the public comment quickly. I heard from several people today about the link that's currently on the homepage, on the Van Buren homepage, essentially asking people to contact the legislature about the budget impasse. So I went and I followed the link and read the pre-prepared letter that's in there. It seems very, very partisan to me. The current letter basically implies that Wolf, not you, Mr. Wolf, but Governor Wolf is to blame for the budget impasse. And I would just request, and like I said, I heard from several people today who actually asked me to request I don't know who it was who made the decision to put it there or made the choice, but
just so you know, Mrs. Bites had sent this to us, and I had asked administration to post that link.
Okay.
It was a PASBA recommendation.
Yeah.
PASBA
It's not,
supporting
it didn't come from a partisan, like a political side.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be different, but since it was PSBA.
What I heard and confirmed when I looked is essentially that the email that is included is only Governor Wolf's and not any other legislature members. So it does look a little partisan. Whether that was, I'm not pretending that was the intent. That's not my point at all. I heard from several people today that they would prefer, if we're going to have a link on the page, that it be a more bipartisan presentation.
I'm just happy that somebody actually was reading it and looked at the link, because that's really, that was the purpose, to stimulate conversation.
All that, it really did surprise me to see it, because things like that, I think, should be discussed at the board level. We're going to be intervening on behalf of the district, really, in a political battle like it is between the governor and the city legislature. That being said, I like the email, and I signed it, and I sent it forward, but I was surprised to see that it was up there without being discussed at the board table first. But I encourage everybody to sign it.
Is there any other public comment? Do you have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.